rock and roll. Today, we are talking writing contracts with Sarah D'Angelo at Keller Williams. What's your title there these days, Sarah?
I'm known as the broker on call. So I assist Mark Weiss, the broker of Keller Williams Capital District, in handling any broker issues, contract questions, fair housing issues, ethics issues, or anything like that.
Yeah, so you do it all, really. You do it
I
all.
answer all the questions.
All the
and fill all the
questions.
forms.
And
I'm really good at filling forms.
Yes.
And that's why I think I'm here today, right?
Yes. Like I had and how we ended up on this call today is I had a contract last week that was for a client that if the contract would have been filled out correctly, we would not have been in the situation that we were in, which was people driving all over to get things signed and
a potential delay in
delays,
closing,
all that stuff. So,
and overall the stress of,
yes, for everybody involved in the
for
transaction.
everybody.
Yep. So I thought, genius idea, light bulb moment. Let's do, because I ended up on the phone with Sarah, let's do a fun educational call to just talk about tips and tricks for filling out the contract to make everyone's life easier. Does that sound fun, Sarah? Sounds fun. Sounds fun.
It sounds fun. I like to fill forms.
So first, before we get on to that, how long have you been in real estate?
I believe it's been like 15 years now.
It's a long time.
So long that, yes, my hair did turn white.
Mine's on the way. It's on the way. So if you were to give anyone your number one real estate advice outside of filling out the contract correctly, what would it be?
Don't give up.
That's great advice. I love it.
Yeah. Never give up.
Beautiful. And it's true in lending too, home inspecting, attorney life. I'm sure it's the same. So I wrote down a bunch of things that are important for, especially if your client is getting financing, but just in general, like things to make life easier. So Sarah, why don't you talk to me about, let's actually show a screen. So I have a blank global MLS contract here. So everyone watching this that is a real estate agent is probably familiar with this. So why don't we just start at the top and work our way down, Sarah? Does that sound fun?
It sounds fun. So I just want to say too, this is the 4-page contract that we see used the most inside of the Capital District. There's also a 6-page contract floating around there. And any contract that has been written by an attorney that has blank lines for the real estate agent to fill in the blanks is acceptable to transfer real estate in New York State. That said, you should be using the contract that you're most familiar with, and the listing agent can always actually drive this. So if you present a contract to the listing agent and it's on, say, a form from the Utica MLS, I think has a different name, but we'll just pretend it's called the Utica MLS. And the listing agent can say, no, I'd like it on our contract form so that it's the one they're most familiar with.
Nice. Good to know. So starting out with what I would assume is basic knowledge, but it's so important and we all make mistakes. So guys, we are not picking on anyone. This is not meant to like call anyone out, or this is simply a service, but it is so flippin' important that everyone's names are spelled correctly when you're putting the seller and the purchaser in the contract. No nicknames. And also, if you're on the buyer side, because I work primarily with the buyer side, making sure that the name that's put in for purchaser is the name that the client legally goes by, no nicknames, and how they want their name to read on the deed, right, Sarah? Do you have any thoughts on the seller side or either of these sides there?
Yeah, I mean, just to add something to the buyer side, as somebody who worked in short sales for a very long time, back when short sales were far more prolific than they are right now, it would benefit your buyer to add their middle initial. Because when title is pulled, if you have a super common name, like Anna Smith, for example. Hi, Anna Smith, a really common name.
Every time I close a loan, they have to sign off on fraud because my name is so common, right? I come up
very common. And so when you add a middle initial, at least it cuts down on the number of frauds that you have to sign off on. You probably still would have to sign off on a few, because I have a feeling that Anna Smith is so common that literally all 26 letters of the alphabet are a common middle initial for it.
Yes.
But I would recommend that. Definitely recommend, if your client is a junior, a senior, a third, add that to it, because they don't know what their parents or kids are actually up to with their finances. So especially if you were, say, a John Smith Jr., that is super compounded common name. So for title purposes in the future, when they go to sell their house every 7 to 10 years, make sure that they make that easy, because of course you're going to be their agent when they go to resell, since you've stayed in touch with them.
Absolutely.
And from the seller's side, one of the most common things that I see coming through on contracts where the seller's name is incorrect is because CRS, which is in the global MLS, what we use for our tax data, has not been updated yet. And so every municipality has to update in their tax records, and then CRS pulls from the municipality's tax records. And some municipalities are better than others as far as efficiency for name updates. So if you're writing a contract and you utilize CRS, my recommendation is that you double check that in 2 places. The first is in the MLS, the owner's name is required to be written in the MLS listing and the detail report. So scroll down, look for the owner's name. Also, check the disclosures that are attached to the listing, because guess what? Their names are probably on those disclosures. The other thing that I think when you're presenting offers, especially in an environment, which when we're recording this, like this is a very high multiple offer environment. Mm-hmm. And so anytime you're in an environment that has high multiple offers, if you write the seller's name, like I gotta be honest with you, if I had 10 contracts in front of me and I'm not a real estate agent and 2 of them said SARADEANGELO, I don't care what's written on those contracts. I'm setting them aside.
Because they didn't pay attention.
I feel like working with the buyer that's represented by that agent is probably not going to be the smoothest transaction, because that agent didn't pay attention to the details from the get-go.
This is your first way to make a first impression with the seller. Spell the stuff right. It will make life easier in financing as well if everything is spelled correctly from the get-go. And it sounds so super basic.
Just pick up the phone and call the listing agent. Like they'll tell you how to spell the client's name or who the client is. If CRS does not match the disclosures, pick up the phone and call the listing agent. We see this a lot too when there's been a death. You know, if one spouse has passed away and there's 2 names on the tax listing, there's only 1 name on the PCD, or even in a divorce, you're better off picking up the phone, calling the listing agent and finding out what name you should be putting on there.
Genius. And I hadn't ever thought about that. Sarah, this is why you get the calls with all the questions, right?
Happy to take them.
Love it. Love it. Thank you. You're such a wealth of information. Also on the financing side, checking with the lender on which clients are going to go on the mortgage, and are 2 people going on the deed, because a lot of times either we'll have a non-occupying co-signer situation, or we'll have husband and wife and wife, husband and husband. One's going on the mortgage, one's going on the deed and title only. So anyone that's going on title to the property needs to go on the contract as a purchaser, because they're going to be taking title. They're going on the deed. So those are kind of our advice there with seller and purchaser at the beginning. Spell it right and make sure that whoever's going on the deed and title is on the contract. It's way less. Then I don't have to pester you guys and make you circulate 13 addendums. right? Like,
New
trying to
page
help.
one, new page one.
Yes.
And guys,
Right?
like this is actually, it's so funny that the name, the very first thing on the contract is such a big deal. It is such a big deal for so many reasons, right? To get the financing through, to make sure you're presenting a great offer. So, and on this note, I think this is the right time to say there is nothing like a typed contract, guys. Like it's 2023.
These handwritten
Please
contracts. Oh,
type
Lord.
your contract.
If you need help, Sarah, I know at KW, don't you guys have classes for DocuSign or like?
We do, yeah. We have classes for DocuSign. They're open to everyone. We have a little bit of a proprietary system that connects into DocuSign, but DocuSign itself is not a proprietary system. There's a lot of options out there. Zip Forms, I believe, is still provided by the MLS. And some people I know still use .loop. Zillow owns them now, and yet some people still do utilize .loop. So there's just a lot of Authentisign, I think, is one of them. There's a lot of options. And guys, really, you could pay Adobe $10 a month and just be able to add text to a document.
Yes. There are ways, and this is in no way a KW promotional endorsed thing, but like KW has a lot of options out there, but so many different ways that you can not have to handwrite. Handwriting just leads to confusion. You can't read something, and you're really going to make an offer when there's 10 other offers and you're going to write it like yes. Please.
Yes. The days of the 3-part contract where we used to have to press hard, y'all, that's what we had to do 15 years ago. I still have one of those in my museum of real estate items.
Before my time. Sarah, do we have anything that we want to talk about in line item number 2, or just making sure that it's the legal address of the property?
Yeah, the legal address, not the mailing address, the legal address of the property. And so you can get that from CRS. Hopefully it's listed correctly on the MLS. I like to always encourage our agents to double check anything listed on the MLS with CRS. And if there is an item that doesn't match up, ask the listing agent for clarification. The city, village, town, that's going to be your lowest taxing entity. So when you go into CRS towards the top on the left-hand side, it's going to be what's next to municipality. So we have a lot of areas in the capital region that are like the mailing address is Colony and the taxing entity is Schenectady, or vice versa. The mailing address is Schenectady and the taxing entity is Colony or Niskayuna. So it's always good to check that because that should be the taxing entity.
Right. And then down here at the very bottom, so if you put the legal address up here, right? To my knowledge, correct me if I'm wrong, Sarah, but down here at the bottom of page 4, that's where you would put the mailing address.
Right. And I see so many people, and let's hang out here for 1 second. I see so many people not fill out this very bottom because heck, I already filled out 4 pages and this is just ancillary information. This, guys, is what the title searcher utilizes in order to ensure they're doing a great job in the title search, which I'm sure is really important to you because you're representing your buyer and that's the title that they're taking possession of. And so because you want to do a great job for your buyer, you're going to go ahead and fill out this information. Property tax ID number is going to be your SBL number. You can grab it along with the APN or without the APN, again, right from CRS. City, village, town, that's going to be your taxing entity. And then the mailing address of the property is literally the mailing address because sometimes it's different. And so therefore there may be liens and judgments on the seller that title is going to be able to pick up having that mailing address.
Yes. And on our side, on the lending side, I don't know if y'all know I do mortgages for a living, but on the lending side, if we have access to both the legal and the mailing, there's less of that, I'm just going to say it, BS back and forth of I need an addenda updating, the address to the appropriate address. So if you just include it all in a well-written contract, we all make mistakes, guys. Dude, I make mistakes all the time. But if you just include both the legal and the mailing up front, it's less likely that I'm going to have to make you circulate stuff. You know what I mean?
Circulating stuff. When you have to circulate stuff, that is time that you could be reaching out to find more people that you can help sell their house or buy a new home.
Absolutely. It's not the best use of your time or my time or any of my team's time to be asking for these addenda that we could just be dealing with up front. And it's going to help your offer look better too. All right, moving on. I'm harping. I'm doing what I call a harp. But let's go to line item number 3. Sarah, talk to me about this one. I have my own thoughts here, but
yeah, so many thoughts. All right, so you'll notice at the very bottom, like this is a very long list of things that are attached to a house, and it is not all inclusive. So at the end of the very long list, it states free of all liens and encumbrances. So sometimes there's items in a house that have liens and encumbrances on them. In fact, there's 3 most common items. Anna, do you know what all 3 of them are?
Ooh, solar panels.
Number 1.
HVAC systems, maybe? I don't know. What are the other 2?
The other 2 is part of the HVAC system would be the propane tank.
Okay, yep.
Yep, often rented, not always.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Sometimes rented, or leased, we should say, and a water softener.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Just while we're talking about propane, since we're just here doing tips and tricks, one of the things I started adding into my conversation with buyers, when I'm talking about closing costs, as a lender, I cannot predict that they're going to have to pay for whatever propane is left in that propane tank. Or oil, etc. So I'm trying to say, hey, there's things I can't foresee, but if you know it's a propane tank, you might just want to say, hey, you might want to budget for any leftover propane because the seller's not giving you that for free, right, Sarah? Hardly ever.
Right. Now, the good news is that when they take possession of the property, especially if that propane or oil, oil definitely is utilized for their heating system, and let's say it's January, it's a good thing to have fuel in the tank.
Yes.
So
good thing. I digress. So in this items listed above, items included in sale, on the lending perspective, please do not add other random, I'm just going to put it out here this way, other random crap to this line. Any random crap you put in line item 3, we are going to request you to, guess what? Circulate an addendum that either removes the random crap or gives the random crap no value. And the reason being is we are doing a mortgage based on the collateral, the property, the actual real property. We don't want to be giving a mortgage on a tractor because that tractor can be sold off of the property. Does that make sense? Anything?
Yeah, tractor, sofa. I mean, I see all sorts of things get put in here, all contents of the barn.
Donkeys, horses. I've seen some weird stuff.
No livestock on the contracts in residential, y'all. Definitely not.
Nope.
Actually had that happen once.
Ooh.
That was a thing. We had to actually change to farm financing. So liens and encumbrances, if there are liens and encumbrances, you're going to want to get the copy of the liens and any payment and make sure you provide it to the loan officer, especially if your client is really close to what it is that they can qualify for. Anna's going to need to take the actual number that they have to pay in that lease and make sure that they still qualify for the house. And then
solar panels.
The biggest, that's the big one, is the solar panels. For propane, they generally actually don't have a charge. It's just that you have to fill it with the company. And then water softeners are wicked cheap to lease, so typically will not affect it.
If you
do want to add,
yes, go ahead. Sorry, Sarah.
Solar panels will absolutely can affect somebody's ability to qualify for the mortgage, and we don't want you to get 3 weeks in and get a declination letter based on their DTI. You do want to add the appliances, so all appliances should be added in here, like actual appliances that are actually being utilized in the actual house, like the refrigerator.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oven, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But if good rule of thumb, is if there's solar panels on the house, talk to the lender ASAP. It doesn't necessarily mean it's the kiss of death. I think Sarah and I have financed a house together before that had solar panels on it. It's not the kiss of death, but the lender is going to be like, oh, crud, what kind of loan? This is literally my head. Oh, crud. Let me double check with my underwriter because they change my job all the time. So let your lender know so they can do their due diligence up front to make sure it's a smooth transaction and we can get everything we need.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Items excluded from sale. I think that's pretty self-explanatory item. I don't think we need to spend much time there, right, Sarah?
You know, if they tell you that something is not transferring, make sure that it gets annotated in there, or expect that the listing agent will add something and your seller will need to initial any addition to that page.
Let's talk about that for a minute. If any changes happen on the contract, everyone needs to sign and date that change. Otherwise, we are going to be circulating an addendum to sign and date the change. There's a theme running here. I guess maybe I've finally tweaked out enough, Sarah, that I'm sick of asking for addendum.
All this, like how to do less paperwork.
Yes. Save yourself time. Save me time. Save yourself time, right? Let's go to line item number 5. And actually, I would love if you would explain this on real estate terms, Sarah, because I think that would be more helpful than me talking about it.
All right. So for those of you that have never written a check in your life.
Oh yeah, there's plenty.
Yeah. This is written exactly the way that a check is written. So what you're going to do is you're going to write the words of the purchase price.
Right here. You can't see it.
Right there in that big blank line right before the big word dollars. So let's say the purchase price of the property is $310,000. You are going to literally write 3 THREE 100 10
like words
1,000 and 00 over 100. Then you put the number.
Yes. And if the the written out number is different than the typed number, guess who's circulating an addendum?
That's a problem.
It's a problem.
So that is why it's actually written out and then written in numerical format, is to ensure that they match.
Yes.
Line A and B is where you put the deposit. This is the good faith deposit or the escrow deposit. And one of the questions that I sometimes get is this in addition to what they're paying for the house? It is not in addition. It is part of what they're paying for the house. Now, if you put it in line A, it says that the deposit is given with the contract and held pursuant to paragraph 16. But guys, this is a holdover from back in the day when we used to have those 3-part contracts where you would press hard because the bottom copy was yours, and then you'd give us a check and we would get in our car and we would drive it over to the listing agent's office and we would leave it as a package with the check. But we don't do that anymore. Thank God for all of those services that I named earlier, where we just send out the contract electronically per signature and hop on a Zoom and review it with our clients. So personally, I don't actually like to put the deposit in paragraph 16. If you are the listing agent and you have your seller sign a contract that says you have this deposit pursuant to paragraph 16, you are responsible with obtaining that deposit, and you should actually already have it in hand. I actually like to put it in line B. I like to cross off the word additional, and I like to annotate when the deposit will be delivered to the listing office. This can be anything that's reasonable, right? Before the expiration of attorney review, delivered immediately upon acceptance via earnest, guys. Like, that's a cool thing. So earnest, just so you know, if you're with a brokerage and you've never heard of this, most of the brokers in the Capital District actually accept electronic deposits. They utilize earnest, not Venmo. Like, Venmo is not a real thing in real estate.
Is that like Ernest Goes to Camp?
Yeah, with 2 N's.
Oh, got it. Sorry.
It's Ernest Goes to the escrow depository.
Yeah, we should make a YouTube video of that. That would be funny. We can dress up Mark.
It would be awesome. Let's do that.
I think it'd be fun.
And then you're going to take that purchase price and you're going to subtract the deposit, and that's what goes in line C. If
There's
you
no
are
seller.
like me and can't always do math in your head, it is okay for you to use a calculator in this scenario. That's right.
This is a
Just like
calculator.
that. And then in line D, you're actually going to oddly add all those back together.
Yep.
To put the purchase price again. And then in an ideal world, you put the word total after it. Now, the reason that you do that is because if you have seller's concessions, you're going to immediately follow that total by the amount that is the net to seller amount. So you'll take those numbers and you're actually going to add them up again. That goes in line D. It should match the purchase price. And then you're going to write the word total next to it. And that's so if you have seller's concessions on a contract, so say, for example, we take that same $310,000 purchase price, and we're going to utilize $10,000 in seller's concessions, which is a lot, y'all. But let's pretend we can actually utilize all 10,000 of that. It's going to say 310 total, 300,000 net to seller. Net to seller. And then you're going to scroll down, Anna, scroll down for me right now real quick to go to the most important section. Please remember to put that 10,000 right next to that $sign in seller's contributions. And I always say, do that in dollars, not in percentages, because percentages confuse the attorneys. And the last thing that we need is a confused attorney.
The last thing we need is a confused anybody. Your lender should be able to help you with what that concession dollar amount is. And I will say, maybe we're not there yet. And at some point in your career, you will need to learn how to operate a seller concession. So if you need a tutoring, if you will, is that the right word? If you need help, I'm happy to take 15 minutes on a Zoom and teach you how seller concession works and teach you how to max out your seller concession for, if we go into a land where we can start doing that again.
Anna, I got the best question for this moment on the broker line the other day, which is, so the client wants to utilize their seller's concession. They need this much in seller's concession because they want to make repairs to the house.
Okay.
Can they do that?
So it depends on if we know about the repairs or not. So seller concessions, for what they are designed to do is to help clients pay their closing costs and prepaids. So when you're writing any addenda or you're putting it in the contract, it should say this seller concession is for closing costs and prepaids. Because if you write this seller concession is for a new roof, well, your lender is going to have a problem with that, right? And then we're going to get involved. So if the seller concession is being maxed out and used for something different, I should say, like, the proper way is that cannot be used. And we all know that the world works in mysterious ways. You could talk to your attorney about that. It's probably the best way for me to put it, like, live on Zoom. But your seller concession is for closing costs and prepaids. If it's repairs, really, it should be a renovation product.
Right. And ultimately, a seller's concession reduces the amount of money that the buyer is bringing to the closing table.
Correct.
And it could be that they don't have the money, so they need assistance from the seller in order to pay those closing costs and prepaids. Or it could be that they have a desire to utilize the money to replace that Formica countertop with a granite countertop. Like, it doesn't matter what they actually do with the money that they save.
Correct.
What really does matter, though, is there is a maximum amount of seller's concessions that you can take depending on the loan product type. So Anna, what's the percentage of seller's concessions available for an FHA loan?
For an FHA, it's 6% of the purchase price. And
for conventional?
For conventional, depends on the down payment and the occupancy. So if it's a minimal down payment, so less than 10%, you're looking at 3% in concessions. More than 10% down, you can do 6% in concessions. Unless you're not living in the property, then there's stipulations from there.
So there's a lot of things, guys. I think what Anna's really trying to tell you is pick up the phone and call her to get the actual answers to these questions as opposed to talking to your clients like you're a loan officer. 'Cause there is a section where, we say we're not loan officers.
Yes.
So don't try to be a loan officer.
I'm always happy. Shoot me a text. I will even do the math for you. Did you hear that? Free math done for you on Sunday afternoons, right? So always better to ask than to have to do what? Circulate an addendum.
No one likes that.
Oh, great. Mortgage contingency. Let's talk about this one for a second. I think it's very important to give your loan officer adequate time to get the mortgage commitment done. That is important. It's always better to text and ask. So for example, if I have a client that's already been underwritten, I mean, you could get a mortgage commitment in a day, right? But if we have clients that maybe need to drive their documents to me, that might take more like a week. You need to communicate with your lender on the timing for the mortgage commitment. So that way, we have realistic time period to get it done in, right?
I think what's really important here, Anna, is that if you put buyers through underwriting, they may already have what we call commitment and you just need to add a house.
Mm-hmm.
So there's another word for that and it starts with a C. We call that conditional.
Oh, conditional approval, right? Is that what you mean? Yes.
Yeah, because it's conditioned on.
Yes, finding a house and that property being fully, title, appraisal, all that jazz. So
yeah.
And I think it's also important to say here that whenever we're doing mortgage commitment, I get these questions and they're like, well, is it conditional? And my answer is always like, well, it's not clear to close. So it's conditional until it's clear to close is my point. There are so many, if y'all followed me around for the day or sat in my office, you would never text your loan officer again about mortgage commitment because you would hear all the things that have to go on to make it happen. But it's always,
and some of them are easy and some of them are hard, right?
Yes.
Like some of them are, this is conditioned upon them bringing their driver's license to the closing table.
Right.
Like that's easy.
Right.
And some of them are more difficult.
Correct.
And so conditional commitment. So this is the thing, right? When we're looking at this from a real estate perspective, that date that you put on there, when you're representing a buyer, this is a buyer contingency. Mm-hmm. And so if the buyer gets declined for their mortgage or does not receive commitment for their mortgage, it gives the buyer the ability to say, I'm not getting commitment for this mortgage. I need to get out of this contract. And I'd like my deposit back, please.
Yes.
If you put down, we're going to have commitment in 2 days and you submit conditional commitment, but then let's say the house doesn't appraise, mm-hmm. your buyer has commitment and they're outside of their contingency.
And I will communicate also with the attorney's office. I don't know what all lenders do, but the attorney's office will be like, has the appraisal been approved? And a good attorney won't let you lift your mortgage contingency until your appraisal's been approved and signed off on by the lender. And I will never name names, but I have had a fairly recent experience with an attorney that lifted mortgage commitment without the appraisal being signed off on, or even back for that matter. It was a whole fun nightmare mess. So give your lender adequate time for mortgage commitment and contingency, and make sure you're working with a great real estate attorney as well.
And I think the other thing to be said here is that's one of those spaces. We have a number of spaces on the contract where there are dates. Mm-hmm. It is everybody's job to follow those dates. Mm-hmm. And it is at the end of the day, the real estate agent's job to follow those dates. So if you think about the word broker, right? And you're brokering a transaction and you think about like a bicycle tire, as the agent, you're in the middle of the bicycle tire and all of the spokes or all of the people that are involved in the transaction, you're where they all meet.
Yep.
So I get it that the loan officer and the attorney are following the dates. At the end of the day, the real estate agent is the one who is the responsible for communication with all parties and should be following all of the dates all of the time.
Thank you for saying that, Sarah. I mean, we're pretty nutty about making sure we meet all of our dates, but it's never hurts for the agent to have that on tabs, right?
Yeah,
So,
I think you probably subscribe to the same philosophy that I subscribe to, is assume that everybody will do their job and also verify that the job was done.
correct. Yes. Assume and verify. I like that. Let's move on to line item number 8, which is my least favorite part of the contract and the most likely to come up and cause a what? Circulation of addendum. Woo!
Gosh, so many things that can go into other terms, right?
Yes.
Like, do they really just leave a blank space?
Please leave it blank. Please leave it blank. Sarah,
I mean, there are things you can put in here that are not an issue.
Broom swept, that's not an issue.
Broom swept.
Maintenance.
But also, guys, also, if you write property to be left in broom swept condition, and then you turn around and have this conversation about all of these items that the seller is allegedly going to leave for you, which you're not writing in paragraph 8, which is fine. You should not ever write those things in paragraph 8, ever, ever, ever. And that's no longer broom swept. So just be cautious of even the things that we put in there without actually thinking about it. You can say seasonal property be seasonally maintained, the exterior property be seasonally maintained as appropriate. That's wonderful. Yes. You can say drive and walkways to be free of ice and snow at time of close. I highly recommend that. And I actually recommend that from about, I would say, September 15th until about May 15th in upstate New York.
Those are all okay to put in that other term. Like, we're not, a lender is not, it's when people start getting weird, wacky stuff put in there, like weird other terms. Is there another
post-occupancy, pre-occupancy?
Yeah. Please do not put that in your contracts for your lender. We do not, if we're doing a primary residence loan for someone, we do not need to know that they're going to become an immediate landlord, right? Or we do not, that's not okay. You need to leave that far away from your lender.
Yeah.
What else where else can you suggest agents put this stuff that they really want to torture me with, is what it feels like? Where should they put it?
So there is something called a blank addendum. You can utilize a blank addendum. The amazing thing about a blank addendum is it is literally blank and it is longer than 4 lines. So you have a lot of space to write the novel of agreement that you made with the other agent. You know, in negotiating on behalf of your client, they were negotiating on behalf of their client, and you guys negotiated this beauty of an agreement. Y'all, 4 lines isn't enough to support that anyway.
Put it somewhere else.
Use the blank addendum. That is what it's there for. But while we're talking about the blank addendum, Anna, can we just scroll back to page 4 real quick?
Let's go right there. Let's go
right there.
Right here.
See this little beautiful thing where it says addenda and mandated forms? The following attached addenda are a part of this agreement. So basically what you're doing is you're pulling them into the contract and you're making them part of the contract. Do not make your blank addenda part of the contract.
If the lender sees it listed in here, A, B, C, D, E, if there is an addendum listed, we will want it. And if it's on here and it has something that the lender need not be aware of, or that it's going to open up this giant can of worms, please leave it off of this list. Please leave it.
Now, do me a favor and scroll up to page 3, about midway through the page. It should be paragraph 19, right there, paragraph 19. So attorney approval. In attorney approval, guys, it says that the attorney has to approve as to all matters without limitation, and that they can adjust any of the matters inside of the agreement, literally without limitation. So here's the beauty of this. Leave the addendum off paragraph 22, and inside of the attorney approval letter, they can make the addendum part of the contract so that it contractually it's binding, but it is not binding on the loan in any way, shape, or form. I feel like you love this idea, Anna.
I love it so much. I don't know how you knew that I was so excited about it, putting it in the attorney approval instead of the contract that the lender gets. Please, please, I beg of you.
Absolutely.
Because also, like, when this stuff, when it shows up, when something shows up here in 22 or item number, where was it? Number 8. If it shows up there, then we are wasting time on the mortgage. So we might waste 3 days at the beginning of the process getting an appropriate addenda or addendum done, where I could have already had the mortgage approved and the title ordered. So we're wasting ring around the rosy for something that could have just been not included with the contract package. It literally causes a boat ton of delay by having to mess with that. I digress.
So
22.
Anna, I'm thinking that I know you have a 4 o'clock, I have a 4 o'clock. Yep. And so I'm thinking, we've done a really good part 1 today.
Yes. We'll finish with a part 2. We had way more info than expected. So we'll stop this at part 1. Stay tuned for part 2 of Contract Tips and Tricks with Sarah D'Angelo.